All right, today you guys we're going to do civil rights. This event that we're going to talk about is actually in the 50s, but we'll also be talking about the early 60s. Then next lecture will be completely about the 1960s. Okay, this is one of my favorite lectures. It's dependent though on this movie clip and also some discussion. So a lot of that's going to be different. I do not know how this video is going to turn out. I'm really having a lot of problems, as you can tell from the last lecture. But I want to at least give it a try, and then we're going to kind of hold hands and do this together. All right. Hopefully that didn't sound too weird. Okay. So the thesis is going to be history can be studied from the bottom up and from the top down. Whenever I ask students what this means, they never quite get it. So let me just say it, okay, and not make you guess. But history from the top down is those kind of the great white man president thing where we study, white men and kind of the political guys. From the bottom up is just the regular people, which is actually something we've been doing the entire course. So we're going to talk about historiography just quickly, which is the history of heroes. We're going to talk about history from the bottom up with governmental changes. Again, one of my favorite topics is Little Rock, and then big worldwide changes, which we'll be doing together. And then lastly, we'll be looking at some TV shows and how TV shows changed. Remember, I told you to look at Ozzie and Harriet from the 50s. So you don't need to write any of this down, just kind of, walk with me through this. But we used to have this great men theory. We used to just study great men. And Thomas Carlyle said in 1840, the history of the world is but the biography of great men. Then a little bit later, another guy, Herbert Spencer, said that the actions of great men would be impossible without the social conditions built before their lifetimes. So do we think it's who the guy is, or do we think it's their context? Next lecture, we'll be looking at Martin Luther and saying, would he have been a hero in 1776 or 1920 or 1850? So you don't need to answer this question on your assignment, but just kind of think about it. Do we think it's just who the people are, or is it their context, or is it both? What I would like for you to do is just take a couple notes right now on what makes a hero. What do you think is a heroic quality? If you think about like Martin Luther King or Malcolm X or Rosa Parks or Cesar Chavez or Dolores Huerta, just to kind of make a little list for yourself, and you'll need that in a minute. Okay, so history from the bottom up. What happened is first we have governmental changes. And again, you don't have to just know this, okay? So after FDR died, we have President Truman, who was a general. And remember, he's the one that stopped segregation in the armed forces. He was very, pro-African-American rights. So he tried to push some things forward. But as we know, Congress was made of half Southerners, right? So Congress didn't want this. The Supreme Court did rule that schools, buses, and sports must be integrated. But does that happen immediately? I mean, with buses, we needed somebody, right? We needed Rosa Parks. With sports, again, I usually ask, but we have Jackie Robinson. Why am I blanking on his name? Sorry. Who integrated baseball, right? I feel like I got that wrong. Anyways, and then schools is what we're going to talk about right now. Okay, so I'm going to show you a video. I'm hoping that it works. The sound I'm just having so much trouble with trying to upload this into Blackboard and all that. But take a look at these questions, and these are going to be part 1 questions A through F. So we're going to watch the video, and then we'll go back through, and if you can try to answer these questions, all right? And the sound does go in and out. And it's not going to load right away. There we go.
A 15-year-old high school student in Little Rock, Arkansas.
Okay, it's like I said, it goes in and out, but it'll start pretty soon. There we go.
Beacon at the end of the tunnel.
That light reached Melba Beals, a 15-year-old high school student in Little Rock, Arkansas.
I was very conscious of what was going on and wanting it to wash over me and wash over Little Rock.
It was about to. In 1954, the Supreme Court had ordered the integration of all public schools in its famous decision Brown versus the Board of Education. 3 years later, that decision would be severely tested at Little Rock's all-white Central High School. Despite the federal court order, Arkansas Governor Orville Faubus had no intention of allowing black students to attend Central High, and he ordered the Arkansas National Guard to surround the school. On September the 3rd, Melba Beals and 8 other black students walked towards Central High. One, Elizabeth Etford, became separated from her friends and was surrounded by a white mob that included Ann Thompson.
There was just a lot of electricity in the air. It was almost a circus-like atmosphere. All these parents on the sideline urging us on and telling us, get out there, don't let them get in.
There are mobs on her heels, like dogs, nipping her. Policemen are watching this. Every time she tries to step between them, they close ranks on her.
If Central High was to be integrated, it would have to be by order of the president. Eisenhower was at first reluctant to interfere.
His record on civil rights was not a good one until 1957, the crisis at Little Rock. And there, a fundamental question was dealt with. Do the states have the right to impose their own social order in defiance of federal court orders? Eisenhower answered it decisively, said no. We have made a national commitment. We are going to desegregate the society. And if it takes the 101st Airborne to do it, so be it.
This is awful. That is vivid still. I could just see Little Rock just being in a state of siege by the troops, That was real fear.
3 weeks after the Little Rock Nine were turned away from Central High, they returned, accompanied by troops of the 101st Airborne.
We're all in an Army station wagon, machine gun mounts. It's a pretty heady day. It's not what everybody gets to go to school. You got 1,000 paratroopers, you got helicopters, jeeps in front, jeeps behind.
We stepped out of the Jeep into this square of soldiers who were serious. As I walked up the steps that day at Central High School, I can remember the click of the leather boots on those things. And I remember being so impressed by who they were. These are Americans. I'm an American. And so the first time I get the feeling that there is hope, that there is a reason I salute the flag, that this is what America is about.
I felt that Little Rock would never be the same again. We would never know life as we've known it again. Because 9 people walked into a school building.
My teenage models had been the kids who danced on American Bandstand. And all of a sudden come the Little Rock Nine. And I can remember having the feeling that if they've been tied and tested, and they've survived, someday, in some way, I'm going to be tested this way too. So I think when the movement comes along in the 1960s, I'm ready for it.
Okay, so I am just hoping that that did go through. Now let's take a look at these questions. If you guys can answer these, let me just kind of go over the facts in case the video did not work out very well. But as you guys know, Brown versus the Board of Education said that separate is not equal, and they required that the schools be integrated, that everything be integrated. But Governor Faubus, F-A-U-B-U-S, of Arkansas said no at Central High School. He would not do it. And he sent the National Guard to stop all this, the Arkansas National Guard. So what they were saying is that Eisenhower, who came after Truman, was very much a 1950s president, didn't want to cause, a lot of problems, but he finally had enough, and he said, this is wrong. The state cannot just do whatever they want to. So that's when they sent the 101st Airborne. What's really neat about this topic, you guys, is that one of the guys in the Little Rock Nine speaks at Dominguez on a regular basis. I heard him a few years ago, so he might come again when you guys are still here. But take a look. Now, the bus boycott was not in there, but I do think you can probably answer that on your own, right? That Rosa Parks, because of Rosa Parks, they had the bus boycott. So go ahead and answer those questions. All right. So this is a picture of the Little Rock Nine, and what I want you to think about is, who did they choose? Take a look at them. I think they were more middle class. I think they were very, very good students. They had kind of, one of my students told me that they had like personality tests to make sure that, just like Jackie Robinson, that they didn't, fight back. And this is a picture of the 101st Airborne. That's one of my favorite quotes. And I'll give you the answer, that she felt like she was an American when she could hear the tap of those soldiers' boots, that he was protecting her too. Now, this is a picture by Norman Rockwell. And Norman Rockwell, you guys, we've talked about him just very little before, but he left Saturday Evening Post so that he could do more political pictures. And this is a political picture. This is of Ruby Bridges, and she was a little girl that decided to go to school even though all of the other kids were taken out of the class by their white parents. So she and her teacher met every day. Now, what I want you to think about is, why do they not show the faces of the gentlemen? And a lot of people have a lot of ideas on that. I think it's because they're focusing in on Ruby and that she's, a little girl doing a big person's job. Now, I used to use this black and white picture for many years, and then I found this this in color picture, and I want you to see what the differences are. So you can see the tomato, and then there's a word that's etched right above her head, the N word. So he definitely is making a statement that this little girl was not treated very well. Okay, so we're going to be doing these together. This is part 2 questions. So if you could write down these 5 categories or type them out or whatever you do, and we will go through this together. All right, so these are big worldwide changes, and they're preconditions for racial change. All right, so I'll go through the answers, and then obviously if you have your own opinions, I appreciate it. But African Americans are going to be migrating north and west, and because they're getting out of the South, they're able to rise up more economically. And I'll talk about this picture in a minute, but usually I ask, how would that help racial change later on? Well, if you're working next to somebody and he does the exact same job as you, it's kind of hard to be racist. Or if you live next door to somebody, like this picture here, again by Norman Rockwell, is it harder or easier to be racist? Well, hopefully it's harder to be racist. Hopefully, as you can see from these kids, they don't look like they're scared of each other, right? They look curious. And, what activity does it look like they're going to be doing? Well, playing baseball. And notice how he has the African American kids with the white kitten, and then the white kids have the black dog, which I think is kind of cool. All right. So, and one more thing is that if they rise economically, then if advertisers are smart, they'll try to cater to them, right? Okay, communists are watching. We've talked about that a little bit. Remember, the communists are saying we have a better society than you. So here's a cartoon showing, hey, look at Little Rock, and look at how bad these Americans are. Communists like to say that they were not racist. And here we go, communist propaganda, keep Little Rock schools segregated, whites only, bless our governor. In other words, making the Americans look pretty stupid, right? So communists are watching, we better get our act together. Revolt in Africa. At this point, we have African countries rising up against their white rulers. And so it defeats that idea that whites always should rule over Africans. So again, this is only, the last 100 years this has been going on with imperialism in England and, different countries. But, well, maybe a little bit longer with the slave trade and stuff, but the actual rulers, like the last 100 years. So anyways, now the African Americans in America can say, wait a minute, it's not a given that whites rule over, and that we can rule ourselves. Okay, a couple points on this. I remember I asked you to think about Leave It to Beaver. Remember that is a 1950s show, and also Ozzie and Harriet. This is, yeah, I didn't talk about Leave It to Beaver, but yeah, Father Knows Best. So we've got the mom, the dad, the kids. So African Americans are watching this. So we can go two directions on this. One is that they could say, hey, I have a little brother that drives me crazy, or hey, my mom makes me cookies, and seeing how that maybe whites and African Americans are similar. They can also say, well, wait, I don't live like that, so maybe I want to, and why don't I? So that's another aspect. And then here we go too. We've got whites that are in the North and the West, and they're watching these attacks on Southern African Americans. So these kids are doing a sit-in. Believe it or not, the guy in the forefront is actually African American, but he's covered in cream. And you can see the actions, the attitudes of the kids behind him. I mean, one's a jerk, one's kind of a follower. But what these kids were doing is they're sitting to desegregate. They're sitting to integrate that counter. And when you're in the North and you're a student, you see this, you think, hey, I need to go help. So here's another one where the police is spraying African Americans with tear gas and then with the dog. So a lot of kids from the North came down and helped with voter registration. I mean, you could die doing this. Lots of kids disappeared into the woods from the Ku Klux Klan, but it did make a big difference that the South was just not able to do whatever they wanted to. Okay, part 3, you guys, is something, again, that we do that's fun together, but we're going to have to do it separately. So I'm going to show you different TV shows, and there's going to be a chart. I'll make this available again in the 1950s readings. So please reproduce the categories and your answers for your assignment. You can do extra research if you want, but I want you to think about how different these shows are than the Ozzie and Harriet. So let me just give you an example. So for example, with the Twilight Zone, let me just go through this. You would mark, yes, it's space and it's weird. No, the animals are not main characters. Yes, it's an other than a nuclear family, right? It's not just mom, dad, kids. Yes, it did have powerful women. It's not in the suburbs, and displaced is a big word, meaning that people are not where they're supposed to be. So what I want you to do is take a look at this. I want you to choose 3 of the following TV shows and then fill in the chart, okay? And then that will be your last part. So we've got the Twilight Zone, Bonanza, and these are all shows that were the most popular in the early 1960s. So maybe do someone that you're not so familiar with, right? And then some that you are. So what's the point of this exercise? Well, in the 1950s, nearly all the TV shows were about nuclear families, mom, dad, a few kids who lived in the suburbs. The early 60s TV shows broke away from that model, reflecting the questioning of traditional values prevalent in the nation. We're not going to get African American shows until the 70s, but that also is, breaking away from this whole white tradition. But anyways, I think that's it, you guys. Today's will be a little bit shorter, and hopefully that video worked. Oh, one last question. Did the Little Rock Nine fit what you said were heroes? And I think so.